Okay, great. So we are here in, hi David, great to have you join us. So today is working group 2 steering committee. I think we also have ecosystem sort of co-scheduled for today, but I thought we could maybe just focus on the steering committee and just give an update on where we are in the various groups, so that everyone can sort of reconnect as to where we are, and also start discussing where we want to go for the next phase. So I've got a few slides to sort of help us frame the discussion, and basically it's talk about what each of the subgroups have been working on over the last month. Review at a high level what can be in the future versions of the chatbot, see if it aligns with what I think I've been hearing from the past couple of weeks. And then we need to start talking about how we want to evolve this chatbot for 2026. There are a bunch of possible use cases in between now and the end of the year. I'd like us to sort of say, here's the top 1 or 2 use cases that we want to focus on, and then we'll talk about. Is there anything else that people would like to have on the agenda? Okay, looks good. I see a thumbs up. So let's review where we are with the subgroups. All right, so I still can't spell, but there we go, subgroups. Personas. We have some great personas that Viola put her heart and soul into and did an amazing job creating, which I think are a good example of what a full persona would be like if we were to access their full medical record and would know lots about their personal information and values. We have been looking at how to condense that information in a way that can be ingested into the LLMs. So, if we were to grab someone's medical record, it could be like hundreds of pages long. So we need a structure for that. So we have looked at the International Patient Summary, but it's a very narrow summary of some clinical conditions and not even all the clinical conditions. And it doesn't include any of the personal values and preferences. So we will be uploading to the working group area a structured format for how to submit persona information to the LLMs. If you're interested in that, that'll be shared in more detail with working group 2.1 and 2.2. And the 2.1 group can sort of chime in, and especially on the things that they think matter for user experience. And then we've also talked about a need for better empathy. And we've developed some training material for training the LLM how to give empathetic responses. I did an initial test earlier this week with Ava and Osaitin, and we ran the training material with the LLM. We ran it with a persona without the training material on empathy, and then with the training material. And it actually did do what was suggested in terms of framing the conversation initially with some empathetic, giving the answer, and then a closing statement that was also empathetic. And the training material helps it develop that empathy at different levels of literacy. And then we started to look for ideas for a better audio response that has different tonalities. And we're looking for a better a tool for creating a human-like avatar as well. So those are things that were suggested by the persona group, and then the technical group is sort of following up on looking for that technology. Of all of that, the stuff that is the easiest or things we can do within a month or two is the training material for empathy and literacy levels. And so Catherine and Lewis have been looking at the architecture for how to ingest larger amounts of training material. And there are different ways of doing retrieval augmented retrieval, which is sort of putting the stuff in a vector database or it's a knowledge base, and fine tuning. So they're looking at the different algorithms to do it, and we'll run some tests. We've got the infrastructure to do that. And we're going to start with the Google products. We're going to try Gemini in the cloud and Gemma on the local machine. And if we have time, we'll try Facebook's Oyama version. So I think by December, we should be able to have a new version of the chatbot that's more empathetic. And then we came up with also a list of about 3,000 words and phrases that are used in patient communication. And we came up with, for the phrases, different ways of expressing those concepts at medium, low, and high literacy. So medium being grades 4 to 6. Sorry, low is 4 to 6, medium is 7 to 9, and high is 10 or above. And so I think we need to, as a group, go through that training material before we ingest it. But I think we've got a roadmap for how to, get this more trained. And then comes the question whether all that training makes a difference. So Ava has been looking at some different empathy scales, and she's reviewed the literature. I've read some of this. We've asked Sayatin also to start reading this material. There are scales that can be used by patients to rate the chatbot on empathy. We're using one right now. There are other ones as well. So we're looking at whether the one we have is really the one we want to stick to. And at the next meeting at 11 o'clock, we're going to go into more detail for that. And we're also looking at how to automate the way in which we can test the empathy by number of empathetic words, number of empathetic phrases, how often they were used, where they were used. And so there is probably a way in which we can have the system compute that and give us results. We're going to have to be very specific about how it calculates those scores, because when we asked the LLMs, we told it, why don't you give yourself a rating from 1 to 5? They all said, we're a 5 out of 5. So we're going to, grade inflation, right? Pat in the back. And so we're going to have to be very specific for how to do that. But let me stop there. I see Lance has a hand up, and let me take questions before we go and update you on the ecosystem discussions. But go ahead, Lance.
That's great, Yuri. Thanks for sharing that. I had a question on kind of the training material around the empathy and literacy and that. And my first question is, have we been posting that somewhere? Because, and I apologize because I haven't been able to be as close to this as I would like to yet. Still trying to get there, and also get more of our team involved. We're still going through reorganization stuff, so it's been a little difficult. But have we had this house somewhere
So we
the whole group is looking at, or no?
the original guardrails are in the working group 2 on DCI network in the resource folder.
Okay.
New ones that we've been developing over the last 2 or 3 weeks. We'll upload them by the end of today. We're just reviewing them, make sure we've got them nicely formatted. Consider them a draft, and they're a draft for input. And then what we want to do is put them on something like a Google Drive where people can co-edit. We have, I guess, the challenge of whether we go Google Drive or Teams. And I think as I recall, for the Pfizer people had trouble accessing Google, right? Google Docs.
Well, um, we can do it. It's just we can't do it through our network. So we may have to go in a roundabout way to do that. And or the other option is one of us pulls in things from the Google Doc and then our internal team works on it and then we put it back out that way. But
It,
yeah, like directly from like I can't go from my computer directly into Google stuff because it'll block me.
yeah, so it'd be better if everyone could edit the same document so that we don't have to merge
I
files.
agree. Yeah.
And I think we tried last time with Teams, and I think the problem is we have a Teams office here,
Yeah.
but it doesn't allow us
Yeah,
to
it's
share.
hard to share.
It doesn't allow us to share externally,
Oh yeah.
uh, and that's our block. So I have to see if they've lifted that block or
Okay.
not. Let me
I
double
think
check on that with Ava. And
avenues for us to check, but if it's easier to do the Google Docs, we'll just find a workaround for us to try and
we
get in
might,
there.
might have to do it at home on,
Right.
on our
Exactly.
laptop.
Or
Yeah.
there's other avenues we might have to do that. Okay, so
And just a caveat about how I developed it. I use the LLMs. I use all the major LLMs to generate this training material. I said, generate for me training materials to train an LLM to be more empathetic at these different grade levels and
okay,
generate word lists. So what's out there has been AI generated. It,
right.
it won't be 100% accurate. It's probably, I don't know, 80, 90% correct. There are a few places where there's a phrase where it's supposed to give it in three different levels, and
Right.
level one and two seem almost the same, right? So like
Yeah.
the lower level stuff is something like between medium and low. It's pretty hard to get some stuff into grade 4 to 6 level.
Yeah, that is tough.
So I don't know on the labeling groups, and Dave, I don't know if you can chime in here. Does what tools, and I know Anne Louise, when we did the initial presentation for this paper in AMIA, we used a bunch of different reading scales,
Right.
212.
She has well, she had a list of those, of which I still think we have access to
Yeah,
finding out.
I don't know. When you go to create your labels, what tool do you use and what grade level are is the company aiming for?
I have to double check, but typically the grade level kind of gets tested with the regulators, and so that's kind of the. I don't want to say we don't have a tool because I feel like this might be a space where I need to go educate myself a little bit more about what people are doing. But like I'll pick on Europe for example. They do what's called readability testing, Yuri, where they have the leaflet read by patients, by a subgroup of patients, and it's studied every time there's a major update to a leaflet. And then that says how well the users comprehended certain sections, if there's any specific areas of feedback, and it has to go through that readability assessment in Europe. I'm not aware of the US needing to do anything like that, but I do know that like patient package inserts and medication guides, I want to say, have to be below a fifth grade reading level. Does that sound right, Lance?
That sounds about right to me. I was
Yeah,
gonna say it's right around 5, so I just
yeah,
can't remember if it's 6, 4, but somewhere in there.
yeah.
And
That's kind of where I'm at.
and that's using which scale? Because there's Fleisch Kincaid and there's a whole bunch of them. Which scale does your
I don't know if there's we don't submit like
but in,
scales with
but
it with the
internally,
leaflet.
We'll list it. Whatever ones we use,
Yeah,
we usually list which
yeah.
one we used. And then
okay. But
there's
you don't
another tool.
as a company, you don't have one specific scale that you standardize on.
I don't know. That's
That's
why we talked to our literacy expert.
I I would say it doesn't come up in the routine processing of the changes.
Yeah.
That's kind of the challenge area is like it's probably something that goes through for like the new product launch and they do something like that. So I just need to go verify.
that would be,
Actually, you're bringing up a good question. Like, what's the actual way we validate this, or is it something that is more
Yeah.
on the regulators to sit there and say this reads?
yeah,
Is it more informal, and the regulators are more set there to police it?
yeah. I'd love to find out from um, you, Lance and David, what your company's tools are. Not
Yeah.
that we're not, it'll be confidential within us, but just to understand, you know, what, and you may have multiple tools,
Well,
but
that's
going,
what I gotta find out, Yuri, because
yeah. So
we
going
have
forward for our
internal
next, yeah, go
and
ahead.
external, and the external one I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah,
But there's a website a lot of times, like just quickly we go to. I
yeah.
have to find out what its name is because usually I'm not the person doing it.
Because I
But
think part of what we want to do is create best practices for the industry and for both
yeah,
private industry and academia. And
yeah,
um, I think when we go to submit this for a journal paper, they're going
yeah,
to ask us, which, okay, you've used 10 of them. Why did you use 10? And why not, why didn't you use some other ones? Or,
right,
what do you learn from one that you don't learn from another one?
right.
And we've got kind of the same situation with the empathy scales where there's a whole
Yeah,
pack of them. And we understand the strengths and limitations of each of them. And
that's it. You got to be able to list that out because I
yeah,
don't think there's a right answer to it. It's to me the biggest problem is what you just said. It's the transparency. And as long as people say, this is what, like, I don't know, even if there were 20 tools, you just need to say, these are the ones I used. This is why I used it. This is the limitations of it. And then at that, and maybe you try two or three different methods, right? And see how everything comes out. But that's the best we can do, I think. And I don't see what's wrong with that if as long as you're showing how you got to your point, how you got to what you got to. It's when people don't do that and they say, well, I just used this tool.
yeah,
Okay, well, that's great, but what are the limitations of that tool and and then did you replicate it somewhere else to see,
yeah. Yeah,
right?
this is the kind of discussion we'd love to engage with all of you and others outside of our network.
Right.
I found that when I was at the DIA conference and many other conferences, this level of discussion rarely happens. You get some
Does
data
it?
they presented, I use the scale. Um, and there is a literacy expert at Harvard. She's kind of retired. I'm going to see if I can get her to come talk to us. Her name is Rima Rudd. I don't know her. I've heard amazing things about her. She's at the Harvard School of Public Health. Um,
Yeah, let me
several
bring
people,
that.
several people I know. Maybe we can meet with her, and but I think we need some experts who has looked at
Yeah.
these tools for a long.
And we have a patient literacy. I know Anne Louise left us, but we have a new person. I just haven't had a chance to. That's the group that's going through some reorganization right now. So I'm trying to be very sensitive to
Okay.
engaging it. So I apologize. It's taken me a
All right.
while, but I have to be careful about that.
Tell them
But
not to get rid of the literacy expert.
well, there you go. But here, so I had one other additional one. I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but I think it's important. So a while back, we had developed some training that we would go into health systems with healthcare professionals, as well as other like patient organizations, other healthcare organizations, and it was what we called health behavior change. And it was based on evidence-based things and working with, oh, that reminds me, I should probably I know there's a pharmacy expert down at, I don't know if he's still there, Alabama. Anyways, I'll find out. But he's who we worked with to work through this. And I guess my point in bringing that up is it might be worthwhile for us to pull that. I don't know when the last time it was re-updated, but to take a look at that because exactly what you just brought up on the empathy, how do you frame the questions the right way? All of these like type of things were in depth into the whole point of that. And I think there might be some good things that we could pull out of that and then feed to the model or models to see how that helps it. Because I found it was very helpful, not only for myself in teaching it, but all of the people that we worked with, it greatly helped them in the things that they were doing and trying to work with patients about it. I will say to give Glenda and Betsy some props. I don't know if we actually worked with patients around that, but I know we did a lot of work with people who did. So, it might be worthwhile to look at it. So, anyways, I'll take a homework item here to see where that's at, and then next time maybe I can just share that with everyone or offline and see if that's something we want to consider to help on the empathy side of it.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah.
All right, so that's where it's. Before we go to the ecosystem, Ava, are there other things that have been occurring the last month that we should share with everybody else across the first three working groups?
I don't think so. I think you summarized it well. A lot of the work that we've been doing is just the empathy evaluations and training. I think that because when we last spoke about like what the next version would look like, those are the two things that we could do like right now. And then there were some other steps, but I feel like those ones were sort of like more down the line.
So I see, Glenda, the summary of the results will be in December. We're still testing. We've got 10, 11 now that we would have had 12, but the patient didn't show up. So we will summarize whatever we have and bring it in early December to everyone. We want to get a bit more data to be able to have a more clear pattern. And maybe verbally, Ava, you can maybe summarize what you're seeing across the tests that we've tested.
Yeah. So at one of the evaluation meetings, I did present like a short report on the first 10 patients that we did the chatbot testing with. If you weren't there, I can send the report so you can take a look at.
How about you see if you can find that slide while I go
Okay.
through the rest, and then we'll share that with you.
Sure. All right.
So maybe I'll go to the ecosystem. We are going to follow up with some new pharmas, Excelion and BMS, who expressed an interest in that. We have been discussing with Komen a closer relationship, and it looks like they're engaged. We have as part of working group 1, we're building a longitudinal database where patients can ingest, their medical records from multiple providers and have access to it. Ultimately, the goal is to connect the chatbot to that so that you can save your discussions into that longitudinal database. We're also in working group 1, we're developing an application for clinical trials. So patients can search for clinical trials and understand those options. And the kind of pie in the sky idea is a co-scientist, which is a tool that will analyze a difficult to treat cases and help doctors and scientists figure out, what new research should be done on those that type of cancer. So getting down to the molecular level, sort of what kind of cancer variants were developed in. And there's a thing called tumor boards where they discuss the most difficult cases, and an even more specific one called molecular tumor boards where they have geneticists and stuff like that. So as we build this longitudinal database, this AI system will be a co-scientist that will help contribute ideas for how to treat it. The patient side of it is how to explain that to patients, right? In a way that they can understand. And so the hope is that we can, for those hard to treat patients, encourage them to donate their data for science, but explain to them, what they're trying to do to further the cause of understanding that disease and further treatment. It might not help them because this will be stage 4 cancer patients. But in some cases, you know, it might actually help. But in many of these cases, these are early kind of testing experiments that they will do on that cancer variant to figure out how to develop new medications. So um, that's sort of outside of the scope of DCA network, but it's going to use the infrastructure for Lumina and how to explain a super complicated cancer case to a patient and what research people are going to try to do. I think there'll be a literacy. So as we learn how to do better chatbots and literacy, my hope is that the chatbot could say, hey, this is what they discussed at your molecular tumor board in a lay language. And this is the kind of research they are going to try to do and to start developing better treatments. So Coleman's interested in helping with that as well, so which is great. So, but I think they're generally interested in engagement, and I know Glenda has had some conversations, and I've had with her as well about setting up a panel for the June conference. So Coleman's been to I think all of our conferences, and so has Glenda, and so we're going to work together on trying to create something new. So let me pass the floor over to Glenda, and she can maybe brief you a bit more about those conversations with Coleman. Go ahead, Glenda. Oh, you're muted. No, you're still muted. You're muted.
Thanks. At the last conference, I had an opportunity to be sitting beside Jerome, and I started talking to him about what was their community doing as far as AI. And he said from a community standpoint, they weren't doing really very much. And that I said, well, how do we start to educate the community around AI and what it means? So I feel there's opportunities for us to connect with the communities and start that dialogue. Because how do we really how do we determine what's a trusted app? So that's really where I'm hoping that the conversations will go, is that we start to lay out from the patient side of it, how do you feel comfortable using this app? So we don't have the answers today, but I'm hoping as the dialogue evolves, we can come up with a white paper or something that will help us to define that more so. So that's on the ecosystem. The other thing that I was going to ask Yuri, and this is just, as you're talking about the clinical trials, because last week I had the opportunity to be at one of the pharma companies, a leadership meeting with them, and they were talking about clinical trials. And we're getting back to how do you bring in more patients and also getting a diverse population of patients? So I was just wondering, throwing that out as a topic here, because what I said is I don't feel that we're giving the patients a real value statement around why they should enroll in a clinical trial. So that was one that I had that I just wanted. And then
so
go ahead.
For that, so working group 1 that's working on for DCA network, we're working on an interface for patients to find clinical trials. And Adam Bloom, who is with a company called CancerBot, actually his main company does other technologies to help training at the corporate level. But he's a cancer survivor. He built his own LLM to find a cancer trial. And we're developing a infrastructure to test not only his software, but all open source software. And there's 2 versions of that interface. One is for clinicians, but one is for patients. And he has access. He lives in Ireland. He's American. and he lives in Ireland. And when he developed chatbot, he engaged with patient groups in Europe, and he has access to a network of patient communities. So Glenn, I think maybe it'd be a good idea if you connected with him as well to see what communities he has access to and how we can bring them into the conference in June. And maybe we could do a webinar even before June, sometime in our early winter, and see how the webinar goes, a panel with different groups. But he, to his credit, he has engaged with more than one patient group in Europe, and he's very patient-centric. So I think he'd be a good person for you and him to connect with. I can provide his email, and I don't know if you had a chance to meet him at the conference. He was on a panel on day.
I remember the name, and I'm struggling. There was one that built it because of what he went through with his dad. I'm not sure. I may be mixing people up, but yes, send me the information, and I would love to connect with him.
I think there was a dad story with him too. But there are a lot of stories at that conference, and now I'm getting them mixed up too. But I think there was also a dad story there.
Yeah. And so the other question that I have, just it's a sounding board for me, really. Should registries help to connect people to clinical trials as we look forward? I know I'm not saying they do today, but as we go forward in the future.
Yes and no. So yes, in that they've collected. So most registries are built with a very intentional purpose, and so they collect usually only the data they need for that purpose. As such, when it comes to clinical trial matching, one of the problems is that a lot of these matching algorithms don't have a full, complete record of the patient, and the trials increasingly are more complex in terms of inclusion exclusion criteria. And so to do a proper match, you need pretty much the full record, because some of them are, the person not only has this condition, but has not had this kind of reaction to things, or has not had this type of therapy before, or certain conditions that are not easily determinable from a single field. And so most of the tests that have been done on clinical trials have been on sort of vignettes of patients that are, and the problem with putting a clinical trial software in a registry is that it may not have all the fields or all the data you need for deep matching. So it depends on the registry and what they've collected, and if those are the data points that are actually useful for clinical trial matching. And so one of the things we're going to do in working group one is try to identify what is the longer list of fields that are actually matter for clinical trial matching, and sort of then report on, we've tested, 5 different algorithms. The ones that did the best are the ones that, use these fields and use this types of algorithms. Our initial feeling is that the ones that are going to do much better are the ones that use more fields, more data. And so I think.
Okay, I'm going to connect with Russ anyway, also. So, but thank you.
Yeah, happy to connect with him as well as show him what we're doing and learn more about that. But you're welcome to share with him everything I've told you here about what we're doing.
Yeah, but if you can send me Adam's information, that would be great. Thank you.
Right, great. So, Ava, could you maybe send Glenda right away an introduction to Adam?
Sure.
So I don't. Okay, so sorry, let's go back to the conference. HL7, we're kind of in a holding pattern. they were going to come to our conference, but they had a leadership change, and their CEO has left. And so there's a few other people in the organization that we need to reach out to. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I think they're a huge standards group. I think being connected with them and their groups, they're kind of an interesting organization. They are nonprofit, but their membership is for corporations. So they don't have the concept of an individual membership or even an academic membership. And so they're having this problem of how do they engage with academia? And academia has contributed time to their organization on individual level, but then at one point they thought, well, let's not include people who aren't paid members. And so then like about a third of the room is academics. And well, where does that leave us, right? Because academia is not in a position to become a member. So they're still struggling with that issue as well. So I've been participating in HS7 meetings for years. And I said, you'll need a resolution for that, because if you get rid of the academics, they're doing more than a third of the work, I think. Some of them, like there are a few individuals who do a ton of work, and some of them come from academia, not all are from industry, but we'll see. But there's general goodwill, so I think we will hopefully see them at our next conference, and we'll engage with them. And then the final thing is the conference. I can give you a bit of a highlights on that. The date has been fixed. It's June 22nd to the 24th. That's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And it'll be at Harvard. I'm not sure if we've received the contract yet. We got to sign that soon before somebody swoops that up. But they said they had it. I'm waiting for the contract to sign it. We are going to have a scientific committee like we did for the last one. So if you haven't replied to me yet, let me know if you'd like to be on the scientific committee. We want to announce that on December 1st or so. And we'll need people to review at least 4 to 5 papers. It'll be over about a 2-month period. So the call for papers will go out in December. Betsy made a suggestion to add a criteria for patient involvement in the design. So we've added that criteria. And we might have both contributed papers. Like we've always had invited people. What we added last time was contributed papers that are peer reviewed. And we had more papers than we could accept. We accepted 7. I think we had 20 or 30. I can't remember how many. And most of them were good. Not all of them, but most of them were presentable. So what we might do is have a poster session. So some will be panels. And I was thinking of adding a 2-hour networking poster session. So from 12 to 2 o'clock, we'd have lunch and an extended poster session. We could have lunch and then go see the posters that are available. So we might be able to include more people. The question is, how big of a conference do we want, right? Because if it's too big, then it feels like any other big, huge conference where you don't have time. So we had around 70, 80 people. Ava, is that right, about for the last conference?
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I think 80 registered, 70-ish showed up. A few people had last minute things that couldn't come up. The room can fit, depends how you set it up. If you have tables, you can fit 100. if you have theater, you can have more. So I was thinking, let me know what you think of this idea. Have maybe the first row is tables that people can pay. And so corporate members would be in the front row, since you're corporate members. And then we have a handful of additional seats that people could buy to be on the front row. And then we could have a row of theater seats, you know, maybe 100 for 100 people in theater style, at a lower price than the people at the tables. I saw another person who did an event at the same venue, and they had for the amphitheater differential pricing depending on what row you worked. Sort of like the opera, right? You have that. So that might be a way to have more people, have differential pricing for people who can't afford, so if you lower budget, you're further at the back. How do you feel about differential pricing and having a combination of tables and rows of seats? Do you think it would create animosity between the people at the table and the people at the rows, or would people understand that it's sort of like the plane, right? You have first class, premium economy, or
I don't have a strong opinion, but I think the tables tend to allow for more networking than I think an auditorium setting would be. That's the only general thought I have. Now, it does make it sometimes hard from a seating perspective to see the presenters sometimes. So that's why I don't really have a strong opinion, but I think it depends on the objective that you're going for, Yuri. Is it more about people watching the speakers, or is it more about the networking? And that's kind of how I would dissect it.
And also, I think if you're going to implement something like that, then you have to be more strict on seating. Like right now, it's sort of like, okay, we have assigned seating for like the morning, and then people are free to like move around or, sit with other people, and even like for like meals and all of that. So if you wanted to have something where they're paying for like whatever level of seating, then there has to be a way to, I guess, let them know that, okay, this is your assigned seat for like the whole conference, you can't move or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think definitely if we did that the people at the tables would have reserved seating. That's how we would brand it. And we would have the name tags, and that would be the assigned seating. I did organize people by different themes at the last conference so that people could connect with each other. So that people from the same company who already knew each other didn't all sit at the same table. So you could get to know other people to promote networking. The feedback we got was generally positive, that people liked who they met at their tables. They thought the mix was, us didn't want like a whole table full of tech nerds and no other, I should call them a tech nerd, but I think I am, maybe I'm not. Maybe just a nerd without the tech. But in any case, we tried to have a mixture of disciplines and companies and sectors. But yeah, that's we have both a desire to have networking, but during the presentation, even if you're at the table, you have to turn the chair anyways to actually see. So I'm trying to balance of how to get more people, but not get too. And I don't know what the magic number is for the conference feeling good. Like, is it 100? Is 150 too much? But we'll see. Glenda, go ahead.
So I like the way that you kind of pre-assigned, because if I was sitting next to Jerome, so I made that connection. I don't know, and this would be saying maybe another room. If we had the posters and there was another room for lunch, then, you know, if you want to talk to someone that's presenting or whatever, then it gives you the opportunity to have lunch or something with that person. Because otherwise you talk to them on the side and then you go back to your seat.
Yes.
So I'm just throwing that out as a thought.
Yeah, we might need, there are these stand-up cocktail tables that we can have. And so maybe we can have more of them in the hallway. But if you want to continue a discussion with a friend outside while the sessions are still going, you might want to have a late lunch. So, okay, we've got some time to fiddle with this, but we'll evolve it. So, a roadmap for the next few months. So we are going to, so we're on version 2. Version 1 was the one we tested internally with us. Version 2 is the one we're testing with patients right now. Version 3 in December that we'll build is this one with better empathy. And so it'd still be text-based, but with hopefully better empathy and better response to literacy. And then we'll look for better audio outputs, and we'll try to have that running by, late February. We'll have to make sure it works with different browsers. The goal of the audio is help people understand the content better if they have problems reading, but also the tonality maybe will help the empathy. So we have to make sure we've got the right empathy scales. If you're interested in the empathy, that meeting for the empathy is in the same room. The evaluation is at 11 o'clock in a few minutes. And then the avatars, which requires more computing power, we'll look at different software to add an avatar in the spring. And hopefully then by next June, we'll have a chatbot that has great literacy, great empathy, great audio, and maybe even a nice human-like face for that. I think we can do it but I think so it's not just about putting the gadgets, it's about figuring out how to evaluate at each step. Did it actually make a difference, and how do we know it made a difference? We need to start talking about how we want to evolve this in 2026 beyond these empathy and human factors aspect. And here are 6 possible areas, and we could sort of teach it to help people with adherence of medications. We could connect the chatbot to wearable devices to track their symptoms at home. We could work on people to be able to have a summary of all their conversations, and also import their medical records and connect the chatbot to a local-based version of their medical record. We could focus on clinical trials and how the chatbot converses with people to explain clinical trials. We could work on having the chatbot collect patient-reported symptoms that could be used for real-world data and real-world evidence, and standardize, how it engages and asks for those symptoms. And finally, we could also help people use a chatbot to visualize their entire medical history that's been imported into their Lumina. So those are 6 possible areas where we could continue to evolve the chatbot. I'd like you to think about this and circle back to your stakeholders in your companies and groups. And I'd like to narrow it down to 1 or 2 for next year that we're going to evolve it. Doesn't have to be just this list, but these are things we've talked in the past and might be relevant. So we'll table the discussion for that. If you have other use cases, please let me know. But by the end of December, I'd like for the group to vote on the priority for 2026. So Next step, we're going to complete the user testing. I'll get Ava to show the slide on the testing where we are. We need you to review the training materials for empathy and literacy over the next 3 or 4 weeks. And then we're going to upload it in mid-December to the LLM and train the LLM so that we have it ready to go in January for more testing. And then we'll do the testing of the empathy on the early part of January, February. And then we'll start preparing the audio and output for the next incremental update. We'll prepare for the conference in June. We should start thinking about the format of the workshop, things that we want to achieve, and structure the workshop and make sure we have the right key stakeholders. So those invitations probably should go out in midwinter so people can book the time. And then as we go on to the rest of the year, we'll continue to evolve the chatbot on the use case that we picked in December. We can start laying the groundwork for all of that in the first 6 months as well. But sort of some of the groups I think we could invite is make sure we have the right groups from pharma, from clinical labeling groups, obviously, but also maybe clinical trial groups, whoever leads your patient engagement groups. So if you can start thinking who from your companies you want to include at our event, maybe even speak. We should think about which key doctors and nurses we want to have there. I think we want to have more PFAC involvement, and I think Glenda and Jerome will help us develop that engagement with patient communities and also with nonprofits who can help us with that. So that's the high level. I don't have any more slides. Ava, do you want to show the
Yes.
and let me
I just have to,
yeah. There you go.
So this is the report that we shared maybe like 2 weeks ago, but it was going over the current results of our testing. This was with the first 10 participants that we did the testing with. So as you can see, we don't have a very diverse patient population, like who's using the chatbot. So one of the goals that we had was trying to find people from different educational backgrounds and different levels of health literacy, because we found that a lot of the participants held a higher education degree and had used like different types of technology already. They were often using things like QR codes and chatbots for other reasons. And then you can see when we did the health literacy assessment, people scored pretty high, like they got almost all of the questions correct. So what we want for the next round of testing is to maybe see if there are some people who score lower on the health literacy assessment, and then see how they interact with the chatbot and how they find it, and then implement any of the feedback that they have into the chatbot. So it's more representative of like a more diverse patient population rather than having people who are around like the same health literacy level and education level. So when we did the feedback, so they use the chat bot and then we asked them to fill out a feedback form afterwards. So what we found was in terms of usability and understanding, the patients found the chat bot to be friendly, approachable, easy to talk to. There was one patient that said they felt stressed or anxious when using the chat bot, but that could be because maybe the questions they were asking, because the thing is, some of the medications that Maria, the persona, is taking could be similar to the medications that the patients who are testing the chatbot are taking. So maybe the questions, they were sort of getting stressed out because they could relate. But we found that they said it was the chatbot was easy to understand and was explaining things. And for trust and confidence, they did trust the chatbot's answers. They did say like they would use the chatbot not as a first line thing, like they would ask questions mainly to their doctor or pharmacist, and then if they couldn't get an appointment or if they don't want to call the pharmacy, they would use the chat bot for those sorts of questions. And then for things like emotional support and just overall the quality of the answers, they said that the response time was good and how clear the answers were was good. Some people said they wanted a more empathetic response and more natural flow. So I guess that can be improved with the empathy training material that we have. And then the natural conversation flows basically because, I mean, the chatbots are used to having a sort of pattern of how it responds. So sort of maybe having a more of a non-formal speaking or some sort of language like that would be helpful. The one thing that there were people who said the same thing was about the safety reminders. So at the end of the responses, a lot of the responses would say, you know, it's best to contact your doctor. And so they said, okay, if you're gonna put those at the end of each answer, then I might as well just talk to my doctor instead of using the chat bot. But the thing is, like, we need to have those safety guardrails in place. So we're thinking of different ways to present that information. So maybe having that safety disclaimer at the top of the page, so it doesn't have to be repeated all the time, something like that. But yeah, so we found that for the 10 patients that used the chat bot, they did have high levels of digital literacy and health literacy, and they did trust the chatbot's responses and they found it easy to use. And so based on the feedback that we got, we thought we can enhance the empathy and just the warmth of the responses, which we're working on right now. Reduce those disclaimers for safety, which we can also ask Catherine to implement and just put it at the top of the page, and then just continue making sure that the information that the chatbot is providing the patients is accurate and it's clear and any users are able to understand what the chatbot is giving them. That's basically it for the first 10.
Great. Thanks so much, Ava. So we'll continue to press on. We're going to do a more detailed analysis of the recordings. We recorded it, and we're going to look for, there's a way of coding what you observe and summarize different types of events. We have to come up with a code book for that. There are other code books that people have used for other similar studies, so we'll do that, and myself, Ava, and Gianna will do that coding, and then by December we'll be able to get back to you with that summary. But generally, I think it's going well, except that recruitment has been hard. I mean, part of it is these are patients that are sick, right? And so they may have good intentions, but they're also dealing with something super serious. And so we've had some cancellation. Some have been rebooked, others we haven't. We'll continue to do that. But I think this just sort of highlights that the more if the inclusion criteria is for patients that have more advanced diseases, recruitment will always be harder. We are going to do another testing for the next round with non-cancer patients who are having hypertension. So hopefully that recruitment won't be as difficult, but hypertension can be pretty serious too. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, recruitment is hard. It's taken a lot of effort to do that, but we're making progress. And so I think that we went a bit over for the steering committee. We will start now with working group 2. Right number.
Evaluation.
The evaluation. I always get the numbers mixed up. Thanks. You're welcome to stay if you'd like to, but if not, we're going to go over empathy scales for the next part. Okay. All right. So, great. So, I think we have.
Do you want to stop the recording and restart it? So we have.
Yeah. Okay.